Corso, um, writer and independent comic creator. How's it going, man?
I'm good. I am good. Thank you for having me over. Thank you for inviting me. I'm very excited to get together and talk about, creating and the process
Yeah,
and how much identity ties into the process also because we both have a common link. But I'll let you get to that.
yeah, no, dude, you're already ahead of me. So yeah, I thought I could pick your brain a little bit about the creation process and kind of what that looks like for you. And real quick, if I could just plug your work, you got the plot, which is a sort of web comic, which
Yeah, it's a web comic that involves I took like a bunch of things from conspiracy theory. Specifically, I took Men in Black. I
yeah,
took like the sleeper agent and I kind of wrapped those around a story of like a guy who doesn't seem to know that who he is. Like he finds himself in this situation, and it seems to be one thing, but at one point in the
oh, I think
narrative,
we're
it's something else. There's more to it as to what we are hearing and seeing, and then from there it goes into another place. I don't want to say too much, but it's on Instagram. I put the whole thing on Instagram as the plot web comic. And if anybody wants to go check it out, well, it's there, and you can
which
just
is
in its entirely, and you can reply
yeah,
to me at Robopulp, which is my identity. Like that's the one I use to post works in progress and such.
yeah.
But the other account, the plot webcomic, that's where the thing is on its entirety. So you can just read it and check it out and let me know what you think at Robopulp, which is my
Yeah,
personal account on Insta.
cool. Thank you. Yeah, I was gonna say I thought that was really cool, man. I don't think I've ever seen anybody do that before, where you can just go to an Instagram account and read the entire comic like in order. I thought that was really cool.
Well, it's funny. Before that, I was debating what to do. Like, I don't want to do print yet because it's a bit too much money. So I want to see if
Yeah,
I can, like, I wanted to put it out there, generate some attention, and then maybe print a limited set of copies and start going to Comic Cons and like retail stores and places like that. But I was looking for a digital platform,
yeah,
and I
yeah.
guess getting so like I tried. I don't want to say the names, I guess, of the platforms. Like, I don't want to sound like I'm ripping them apart, but they had the certain platforms that are supposed to be creator friendly had certain amount of limitations
Mhm.
that I found frustrating to work around. Like they require you to like trim your comic more to make some adjustments, and I'm like, this is the final, this is it. Like this is the final cut. Let's say I don't want to
Sure.
make any more adjustments because now I'm changing the presentation. I believe presentation and storytelling go hand in hand. Like there's a story, but the package also matters. Like I am a big fan of old school vintage paperbacks because they had fantastic cover art and the cover
Yeah.
art was honest. Like a cover art gave you a hint of what to expect in the narrative. So I felt that if I tried to fit in within these the requirements of these platforms, I was sort of now kind of changing the message a little bit. I felt that I was being dishonest to whoever might decide to check it out and read my webcomic.
Yeah.
And I reach a point of frustration. I don't know what else to do. I just start going through YouTube and I don't know how I came across this, but it was a girl, like a girl who actually makes comics, and she posts them on Instagram too. And I'm like,
Mm.
well, that is so simple, like it's such a simple thing. It hadn't occurred to me. I was taking this very roundabout, long, complicated approach of creating accounts, then deleting them because I was finding the platform. And then I was like, well, I already have a platform. I mean, I already have an account, an Instagram account. But I was like, well, I'll create another one. I'll create another one and I'll just put it there. I'll put it there. And I like the fact that it gave you two views. Like you can scroll, you can just go to one image and then scroll down, or you
Mm.
can just simply take the profile view, like the I guess the bird's eye view, and
Yeah.
just look at that. And visually, it gives you something a little bit different than you would if you were to go, to scroll through each image at a time.
Right.
And so I was really excited about that. I was like, wow, okay, so I can work with that. And I did it, and I posted it there. And I'm very happy with how it looks. And the feedback that I'm getting from people, like you were telling me that you
Yeah.
checked it
Yeah.
out, and oh man, I'm glad because I was
Yeah.
just about
Yeah.
getting to the point where I won't put it anywhere. I'll just hang on to it for now and go do something else because I was just getting so frustrated. I was being exposed, I guess, to the not the dark side, but the pet peeve side of putting content on the internet. How you do things on analog, on paper and pen and ink and all that, and you scan it and you're ready to show it to people, and you find that certain platforms have some restrictions that just irritate you and kind of just force you to compromise. So it's
Yeah.
something. It's a lesson. I will be thinking about that for whatever I do next. So
I think,
that's my story up to now. I have the webcomic there, and um, I'm thinking of other things to do because I'm not a fan so much. I love comics, but I am more. I am in love with storytelling, with
yeah,
stories, and I love the fact that we're in a time now where you have more options to tell stories. Like there are now threads like in Twitter, and in fact, I didn't know this recently. Someone brought this to my attention. M24, the studio M24, A24, I'm sorry, A24. They made a movie out of a thread that went viral. It's a movie called Zola with a Z, Zola. I didn't know this, but they brought it to my attention, and I look at that and I'm like, oh wow, like this is amazing. Like someone took a thread and made it into a movie. I don't think the movie is very good, but I'm more fascinated with the fact that someone in Hollywood thought like, let's make a movie out of this thread. Probably only because it went viral, which goes to
right.
show the power of positioning of influence on the platforms. You know, like if you do something that generates buzz that makes it all the way to these little chambers in Hollywood, you can actually have a something that you literally typed on Twitter be made into
Mhm.
a movie. But I'm more into the fact that they're using the platform itself because I was mentioning how there are people telling stories on Twitter. There are people who using the platform itself to tell narratives in there. When
Yeah,
pandemic happened, you know how like people started binging on Netflix or binging on movies.
sure, yeah.
I was checking out like YouTube and on Insta doing that, and I was really fascinated to see how they were taking this very modern medium, this very modern platform, and applying the very traditional episodic form of storytelling. I'm like, I want to try this. This is amazing. Like I didn't think this was possible.
Mhm.
So comics, in some ways, is one medium, but I'm interested in all the ways that are possible to tell stories, like in audio drama, for example. That's something I remember hearing it growing up. It kind of went away as MTV and other mediums became more dominant, but it's back on the internet. There are people who like they just learn how to do it. They learn how to tell stories visually. They write them. They find actors. They produce it and they just put it out there. They put it out there and then they market it, and little by little it starts finding its audience. And I am just fascinated with that. Like I
Yeah.
imagine you are doing that yourself too because you make music and you produce music and you put it out there, and little by little the same thing. It's finding its audience. It's connecting with people.
Yeah, I think, one of the things we've talked about on this podcast before is, just the idea of like using what you have, and I think it's more important to just get started and get that momentum going, using, whatever form you can. So, I mean, I think that's really clever that you were able to put something out when maybe weren't able to find the right whatever distributor or whatever, and you just said, screw it, I'm going to do it myself and just put it up on Instagram. I mean, I think that's brilliant.
In my case, though, I love what you said about how Jyoti started. There's a part of me that tends to hesitate a lot. Like it tends, I want to do research. I'm one of those people who wants to know everything ahead of time. The more I actually go on to do well to capture an audience and sort of command attention, are the people like you said who just get started. So that's one thing that I'm working about my personality to change. About just start posting stuff out there and figure things out on the go. Like don't worry about trying to research and know everything ahead of time because I see now that you can't know everything ahead of time. It's so vast and it's always
No,
changing.
and I
It's
think
always
you
mutating. So it's like, nah,
totally.
just get
Well,
started. Yeah.
I think you learn so much by doing,
It
and
was a learning experience. Absolutely, it was. Yeah. In your
yeah.
case, do you feel the same? Like when you started making your music, were you thinking the more traditional way of like making music, go into a label and then changing your mind, or from the beginning you
Oh,
thought about using the platforms to get your message out?
well, I mean, I'll tell you this much. I mean, I learned a lot doing the first release, and I mean, I don't know, my case might be a little different because when this project started, I did join a label.
Mm.
It was a small indie label, but that for me made a whole lot of sense. And I wouldn't say that makes sense for everyone, but for me it did. Um, and yeah, I had a team basically helping me out, and we were working together, and it just I just had to get started, and that snowball effect, started to happen. And now, I mean, now I can look back and think like for my next release, there's probably things I'm going to be doing differently. I've released a few different things a few different ways at this point. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm really still kind of figuring it out as I go. I mean, I don't think that there's any rules or any one way to do things about for anyone really releasing content, putting their own stuff out there. I mean, I think it's more important, the idea of like community building and just having, yeah, I mean, having people you can share it with, and I mean, you never know. You gotta get it out there, and the sooner you get it out there, the sooner you can start working on the next thing. Really,
I think yeah, I think that's so, and I think you're in a unique position too, in that you can still do the traditional thing, work with a label, a small label,
yeah,
but you can also do your other thing too. Like, and maybe there's something that you're creating that they're maybe not so sold on. It's like, well, I'll save that for my for this, for the internet, for like I'll put that out there. But
sure, yeah,
it seems like a cool situation that you're in, that you have that option to continue working with a label,
yeah.
but you can still do your thing independent of the label. Another thing that maybe it's a little too experimental for them, or too far out there, or
Well, I
any of
mean,
those situations.
they're a pretty experimental type label, I would say, but yeah, I mean, they've been so cool about really anything I want to do and letting me do it the way that I want to do it. So, I mean, I'm really privileged to have that, honestly.
That is very cool. Like, that is kind of the situation that I want to change about myself. Like, I've been doing things in a vacuum. Like, I've been doing things kind of by myself. Like,
Hmm.
and it sounds like, I guess, in your case, working with a label maybe brought you out of your shell a little bit. If you consider yourself maybe an outgoing person, or if you're too protective about what you do, maybe that environment made you feel safe, made you feel encouraged to let go of certain things, to do more. And
Yeah,
I feel like I'm
yeah.
working in a little vacuum, in a little space. So I'm actually very eager for collaboration,
Oh,
because I
cool.
think you need
Yeah,
that sometimes. Someone like me, who tends to hesitate, who tends to like be guarded about what they're doing. I definitely need that push of someone who says, "No, no, let's just do it. Let's just do this thing, and we'll figure it out as we go." Like, so, in
yeah,
that sense, I am looking for people to collaborate with, who know more than I do about things like that, because there could be someone who probably could have answered those questions for me in the beginning, but I
yeah,
didn't think of reaching out. So that's one thing I'm changing about myself. I'm actually seeking the advice of people who are doing really well on social media. Like, I'm asking them, how do you leverage audiences? How do you expand your reach? How do you bring your what you do to more people, and things like
yeah,
that?
yeah, yeah.
So,
So yeah, I'll just put it out there. If anyone's interested in collaborating, you're Robo Pulp on social media, and
thank you,
you
thank
guys
you.
can you guys can get in touch. I mean, it sounds like you're looking for all types of different creators to kind of bounce things off of and
Yeah, yeah,
see
because
where
like I
things
said, I'm
go.
I'm I'm very interested in audio drama, but I don't really know much about sound. Like,
Hmm.
writing, I think, is the strongest foundation I have. Like, I can write, and like, you mentioned earlier about use what you have, and I'm very much in that regard. I can shoot, like, I can make a short film with next to nothing, and it
Yeah,
will end up looking more expensive than what we actually had to work with. So that's kind of my
sure.
my forte. But when it comes to like marketing, when it comes to promoting, just there's a number of black holes and gaps in my skill about that. So this is where people with far more knowledge than I have can help out, and together we can do something bigger than if we had just been doing independently.
Hmm. Let me take a step back. Let me ask you a little bit about your writing process. Like, what does that look like for you? Are you the kind of person that's just getting ideas as you're going about your day, or do you sit down and say like, all right, I'm going to write this idea and just kind of go for it, or how does that work for you?
Typically, it's like that. It's like an idea, some kind of idea, that takes, it's something that just stays with you. Like, I wonder if with music it's the same thing. Like, maybe you have a chord or a particular sound, and you
Mhm.
start building a song around that sound. Like, it's very similar. It could be a line of dialogue, like a line of dialogue that I think is cool, and it has like depth, and it has wisdom, and then I'll start building the thing around that, and building the thing
Mm.
around that. And sometimes it's an image, like, I'm trying to think. I remember years ago, like, before digital cameras, I was at a park, and I was sitting on a bench, and there was a tore up photograph, a tore up 35 millimeter print, like scattered like confetti on the ground. And
Yeah.
I'm looking at that, and in my mind, I start thinking, what if I piece this thing together, and it turns out to be the 35 millimeter photo of a dead body. And then from
Oh,
there, I started building a story about how I decided to do that anyway. And
yeah.
next thing you know, like, people are showing up, like standing outside the guy's door. People seem to be following him, and building a
Mm.
mystery. From the genre that I love and that I like to explore best is suspense. It's building unease, building dramatic tension over something, over a MacGuffin, let's call it, because that love of suspense combines with the classic detective story, which involves a quest or looking for something. Like, when you think of the Maltese Falcon, there's a quest for the bird, this bird that's supposedly worth something.
Yeah.
And so I'm a fan of that. I am a fan of that because I also equate that to the hero's journey. You know, the journey where the hero leaves the what he knows and goes on this journey, and he comes back changed. He come back. It's the journey changes him. So these elements are sort of um, the overarching elements that I use to tell a story, to tell a narrative. There has to be some MacGuffin. There has to be something that is being sought. It's being looked
Right.
after, and that instigates competition. That instigates suspense. That starts like a plot. Like that starts like things in motion. But the process is it's that sometimes it's sitting down to type. Sometimes it's a bit of a cliche aspect of going to cafes and writing on notebooks. But I go back and forth between writing on notebooks with pens. I love that aspect of handwriting. I like the messy aspect of it. Like
Mm-hmm.
you're just writing really fast. I got to the point where I actually kind of rate pens now. I'm like I recommend like a ballpoint pens or felt tip pens because they glide over the page.
Mm.
Ballpoints tend to get like the cheap ballpoint pens tend to get stuck in the paper and they
Yep.
kind of slow you down.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I kind of bounce between those two. And for a
Interesting.
while, I was using Microsoft Word, but then Google Docs came along, and Google Docs is fantastic. It's
Yeah,
free. It's literally right there for you.
that's what I've been
Yeah.
doing. Yeah.
So that, and sometimes it's really just a photo. Like I love I grew up with reading comics, but I grew up in Puerto Rico. I grew up in a Spanish speaking country,
Mm-hmm.
and one thing that was really popular there were what it's called fotonovelas. It's basically photos. It's like black and white photos of actors just told in the same way that arranged in a page in the same way that you would arrange panels in a comic book,
Oh
and then they
wow,
would put like a little bubble and a caption and the dialogue, and they were like
that's awesome.
sleazy. Yeah, they were like sleazy. They had to do usually with adultery and
Okay.
like criminals, like someone doing something and like fate catching up to them.
Yeah.
But I
So it's
love that.
kind of like a soap opera kind of thing, like a
Exactly,
novella.
yes, it was
Yeah,
that. It was not original storytelling, but I love
yeah,
the cheap, sleazy aspect of these things done on like with black and white photos,
yeah,
with
yeah.
like this type that was kind of a little bit smudged,
That sounds
with
cool.
like this pulpy paper, and the covers were like garish. There was like no graphic design applied to like the cover design, but they sold in the millions. They sold like they had a
Yeah,
huge audience. And I was more fascinated, not so much with the thing itself, with like the photonovelas itself, but rather with the behind the scenes. Like I imagine there was like all kinds of illegal activity going on during the making of the book. So it's
mm,
one case where I'm just so fascinated with like the making of it, the thing itself. So that's another aspect of my storytelling. The not so much what you're seeing, but the story behind that. Like the story behind what you're seeing. Like how sometimes there's a movie made and the movie is kind of boring. But if you ever get a hold of like a behind the scenes, you find out that the story behind the scenes was probably way more interesting than what was being made. Like there
oh
was like
yeah,
all kinds of shenanigans. Like the
yeah,
director was probably doing improper things with the leading lady.
yeah,
There
yeah.
was drugs. There was like a maybe the movie was being funded by mobsters. Like I
Mm,
find that fascinating. Like that's sort of the secret aspect, the behind the scenes aspect. I call that. So
sure.
I am exploring that more currently in my storytelling rather than like telling straightforward stories in the print style. I'm exploring telling stories in a format that is more like interviews. Like let's say two people having a conversation and it's being transcribed. Like let's say you and me, if we were to transcribe this, uh, it would be like typed like your name and my name and then whatever we're saying to each other. But there would be a narrative eventually that would tell a little narrative. It will tell a story.
Yeah,
So I'm very fascinated with the whole. I call that multimedia storytelling, which feels very today. It feels very contemporary. How we take information now, because we get part of our news from Twitter, maybe a
mm-hmm,
little bit from TV, maybe part of it comes from YouTube, from another source. You
mm-hmm.
have this sort of puzzle, and you take all this information, and it tells you something about what's happening in the world today, or it tells you something about a particular personality, like a I don't know an influencer who's you put all this together and you're like, man, this guy is kind of an asshole. This person is kind of a dirtbag, like that kind of thing. It's not being told directly to you, but you cannot piece that together from all these separate sources of media telling you the story. So I'm exploring that now. I'm exploring that form of storytelling.
Cool.
I'm
Yeah,
wondering if that applies to you. Like, how does your process go? Because you work primarily with sounds. You don't really have lyrics to your
yeah,
music. Yes.
yeah. Well, so one thing that I noticed in this conversation was it sounds like what you're writing is something that is exciting to you. It doesn't sound like you're not trying to write a story that you think people are going to like necessarily. and correct me if I'm wrong, but you're writing. It sounds like you're writing to entertain yourself in a way,
Yes,
right?
yeah, there is truth to that, yeah, but there is that is true, but I'm also sort of how would I say this? I am kind of taken on after what I love. When I was growing up, when I was, before I started writing, there were certain movies that I responded to. Like I would respond to, and I did it respond to it on an instinctual level. S- certain writers, certain movies. And as an adult, when you start kind of examining more what you respond to, when you're looking for your voice, you notice that there are certain characteristics. And for me, the stories that I tend to enjoy the most are the ones that take some element of science fiction, something of the fantastic, and you mix in something of the criminal element. So I like crime thrillers, spy stories because of the suspense factor. And again, you have the quest. The spy story involves usually there's this code as message that you have to get to the allies before they kill you because it could change the course of the war.
Right.
And science fiction because it's the literature of ideas. Ideas are the primary driving engine of science fiction stories, and crime thrillers because the best crime thrillers for me have a philosophical existential aspect to them. There is something about existence, about how you're living your life, and there's something that you want to change but you don't know how, so you do these things.
Mm-hmm.
So all this comes together, and like you said, I am doing it to entertain myself, but it's more like when I would read a story and I was just mesmerized and like I'm just turning the pages or I'm just completely like mesmerized watching the movie or watching the TV series, the feeling, that kind of breathlessness, that kind of excitement, that feeling that I had watching, this particular piece of media or reading this particular piece of media, I want to give you that also when you watch something that I made, when you're listening to an audio drama, or if you're reading a short story, or if you're watching a film, or if you're reading a comic. I want to give you that same sense feeling of mountain dread, of like mounting building menace, and something happens, and then the suspense increases, and it builds and it builds, and it leads to to a finale, to an ending that is a little bit of a curve, but not really. Like it's actually being it's being telegraphed through the narrative, but it still catches you in a bit of a surprise at the end. So those are the
Yeah.
things that growing up, those are the things that I responded to the most. And I
Yeah.
guess I am taking those things and now doing it myself. Like I'm doing it for myself, but that feeling that I had, I want to give you that as well when you're sitting there as well,
Yeah.
when you watch the thing or
Yeah.
read the
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Mhm.
So sorry, you had asked me a question.
Yeah,
What
I
was
was
it
wondering if your process, what is that like? Because I try to put myself in the place of a musician because I love music also,
again?
and I try to put myself in that place also. If not from a musician, at least from someone writing lyrics, and
Yeah. Sure.
it's kind of an alien place to try to inhabit, because when musicians do something amazing, I'm in awe of that as well. And I also draw inspiration from musicians, like for example, like I don't think this is not a plugin, but I love Alice in Chains. Like I love the band
Sure.
because I
Yeah.
love what they do. Like I consider them an existential rock band, which is a thrill. But when you combine like intelligent lyrics that are also accessible, to me that is a triumph, a creative triumph. So I was wondering, like, who do you draw from? Like, who are the people who shape what you do now? Like, who are
Yeah.
the
Okay.
musicians that
Okay. Yeah. I mean, in terms of like influence and stuff, I mean, it's hard to say because I think the music that I'm making now might not necessarily reflect like what I've listened to growing up or whatever. I do make music for myself in a lot of ways where,
Mm,
I'll sit down and I might not have a plan, but as you were saying, I might be inspired by a sound or
mm,
in my case, I do a lot of sound design. So I might create a sound or create a sample and sort of get inspired from there. And then that may turn into a whole song. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, if I gotta go influences, I mean, I was such a music freak growing up, where I was just into everything I could get my hands on. So everything from, I mean, I hate to sound cliche, but of course, the Beatles is like musical education 101.
mm.
You know, Nine Inch Nails, of course.
Oh yes, yeah. Oh man, he is one
Yeah,
of my favorites. He is
yeah,
amazing.
yeah. But I mean, I really was into everything. Like, I was trying to get, I was listening to world music. I was listening to trance at the time. Was listening to, all types of like electronic music. Rock music, guitar music, metal. hip hop, trip hop. I mean, just literally every genre I could get my hands on. So, I mean,
Wow.
there's so, yeah, I mean, I could go down this sort of rabbit hole if you want. I mean,
Oh, I
there's
guess we don't
so,
want to go too far into it, but I mean,
yeah, yeah, I mean,
that is pretty
there's so
impressive that you
much.
like everything. Would you say country is also an influence, or maybe that's drawing the line?
Well, I will say this, man. I'm not really into pop in general, so I'm not into like, it just doesn't really do much for me. But when you say country, I mean, there's country artists like the outlaw country scene. I really respect good songwriting. So even like Willie Nelson and Patsy Cline and whoever, like I I can dig it. It might not be my go-to, but I mean, a little while ago there was a band called the White Buffalo that I really dug. They're kind of like outlaw country kind of stuff.
Hmm.
They did a bunch of music for like the Sons of Anarchy show.
Oh.
So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say like I mean, there's people that say like I love everything except for country. Like I truly love everything, but I'm not really into pop. So there's like pop country is like what's really popular in this country, and I'm just not into it. You know?
Hmm. I'm curious, actually. When you do, I'm guessing that you draw inspiration from movies too, right? Like,
Sure.
do you have a
Sure.
genre that you like more than any other, or you also draw from any movie at all? It doesn't matter.
Well, I'm definitely really big into horror. That's probably I probably watch more horror movies than anything else.
Hmm.
But I do love film, so I mean I appreciate really anything if it's good, honestly. I even take pleasure in what people consider bad movies. I think if you're really into film, you watch good movies and sometimes you watch bad movies, and sometimes the bad movies are a lot of fun to watch. Just
Yes.
good
Yeah.
clean fun. So um, yeah, so I don't know. I really like independent filmmaking, and same with music. I mean, I could throw out many more musical artists. I just don't know. It might be too obscure. People might not know who I'm talking about.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I mean, I really appreciate underground art. That's something I'm looking to do on this podcast is really interview more, underground artists, underground writers, and underground musicians, and really just kind of pick apart the creative process a little bit. And I don't know. It's been pretty informative so far. I think I hope that people are able to get something out of this and be motivated to like get out there and start making stuff.
Yeah, actually, now that we're talking about that, I want to ask you something. Like, so you watch
Sure.
horror, a lot of movies, to horror movies. Like,
Yeah.
do you ever watch a movie about a particular movie? It could be a bad movie, and you're like,
Mhm.
this sounds like they made this with the Casio 1000. Like, I could do better. Do you ever feel like actually removing the music and putting your own, like, as a fun creative exercise, like actually make something, just to create it, just to say, just
Yeah,
because you feel
yeah.
like the music doesn't do the movie justice, so you're like, I'm gonna
Sure.
remove that and I'm gonna put my own score and I'm gonna make it better for
Yeah,
the
sure.
movie.
So, well, it's actually funny you brought that up. I mean, when I was starting out on Twitch, that was something that I used to do a lot, where I would play more like an older movie, like generally in public domain, so I could get away with it. Where I would put,
Mm.
I'd put on a movie like, like an old Vincent Price movie or an old, Night of the Living Dead or something like that, and I would just do a live film score along to the movie, and that was a
Oh
lot of
yes.
that was a lot of fun, and people seem to dig it. So I mean, I may have to bring that back and start doing more of that
I
because I
remember
do
that
really
you
enjoy it.
I remember that you invited me to a couple of those because they were like late at night. But there's like a
Oh
like a
yeah,
3 or 4 hour
yeah,
difference between us. I remember like they
yeah,
was late, but I was like, man, I want to stay and watch this, but it's like it's too late for me on my end
yeah,
where I'm in the East Coast. So,
yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
hopefully, yeah, I hope maybe once in a while if you can do that, I would love to join in, or even better, like make something in real time. Make something in real time where like people can see the process. Because this is for creators. It's like I and that would be like a great exercise too. It's
Mm.
something to keep that in mind for the
You
future.
mean like where people can actually like see what I'm doing a little bit more? You mean?
Yes, or even better, let's say I don't know. This is just a wild idea, but let's say I shoot a bunch of video that tells a narrative, and I'm like, yeah, why don't we do a live Twitch or a live something, and we just go over how you would score this, for sound, for effect, because music is so
Mm.
important, sound is so important for like filmmaking, for any kind of like video, any kind of video, sound is more important really than the image itself.
That's a good point, and I agree with you completely. I think a lot of times, as long as the audio is good, the video is a bit more forgivable.
Yes, yeah.
Um, so you can have, you can have crappy video quality, but the audio's got to be on point. And I think a lot of times when you see a low budget movie or an independent movie, and it's something that it's like unwatchably bad, it's generally because the audio is bad.
The sound drives you crazy, so you can't watch it. Yeah.
Yep, yep, yep.
Yeah, but in addition to that, just the sound, like this goes back to what I asked you because I'm not, like I said, I'm not an expert on sound, but I am aware that cinema works best at a visceral level, at an emotional level. Like it's not so much logical, but it's something that you feel.
Hmm.
And watching some bad movies, I am like, this movie could be improved so much if you remove the score or if you did sound design a little bit differently, like remove some sounds, add other sounds, and you can increase the tension so much. And
Yeah,
so that's why I asked you about that because I see that I'm like, whoa, let's just try that. Let's just do something, just for the sake again of just doing something, just to take some to share that process, to show this is how we're gonna do that. We're gonna take this particular piece of media, like you did before, like you did back in recent past, where you would take
yeah,
a movie, public domain, which
yeah.
usually translates into low budget or something made with not a lot of care.
Or just
And you can
old
say, I'm gonna
something.
put like a
Yeah,
soundtrack that is made with like TLC. I'm gonna give the TLC that this movie needs.
yeah, yeah. Well, actually, I wanted to go back to the plot a little bit. I wanted to ask you about that.
Okay.
So the plot, that's the web comic you have on there, and
Yes.
when I was reading it, I was just kind of thinking that, I was thinking of like what it reminds me of and stuff, and I was wondering if you see this as like a bigger picture kind of thing, like because I can see it as like a trilogy, like the Born Identity or something like that, with like multiple chapters or something. Is that something that you're thinking about, or like do you think it ends and that's it, or like do you see this character like going on and like exploring this like universe you've created?
I don't see the character itself exploring it, but I do see like a universe building around it. Like I'm trying to think of where did this come from. Like we're talking about creativity, and
Yeah.
one thing that fascinates me is, maybe this happens to you as well, but when you put something together like a song or something,
Mhm.
like let's say it took you like a couple of weeks to do the actual recording of the song, to the writing process, and then to have the song finished. The thing about that is that chances are the sources that influence you, they've been building in your mind over a period of time. So, and it could be years, it could be like years before finally together in your head. Okay, now I am about that. Now I am ready to put the song together. Now all the sources that I need, all the inspirational sources, are now in my head, all clicking together to make a puzzle of some kind.
Mhm.
And oh, by the way, I love the image that you start to show with the brain goop, that little brain image with a little like a maze. That is so cool, and that was awesome.
Thank you.
Love that. So I am trying to think of where that comes from for myself, because when I made the graphic novel, I
Mhm.
was thinking of a standalone. But over the course of making it, meaning the actual course of like putting the book together, I started thinking of expanding it, and I think it was because I was watching a lot of media that had continuing universes, and I guess when it comes to trending in platforms, people do seasons now. Like I notice a lot of people, like when they podcast, they do like season one, season two, and
Mhm.
but I think they do it because it seems to be trendy. It seems to make it easier for people to find them. It seems to be like a form of shorthand for people to find your content. I'm doing it more because it's more of an artistic shorthand. I'm gonna call it artistic shorthand, and by that I mean that you're building this universe and you haven't completely built it up. You don't know, you kind of have the broad bird's eye view picture of this universe, but you don't know the alleys. You don't know like the little shops that have like mysterious items there that you can build more stories on. Maybe
Yeah.
there's a character that maybe was only briefly seen in the story, or maybe not even in the story. It was just someone who was mentioned and never actually participated in the story. And these things linger in your mind like, well, who was that? Let's go back and get to know this character more. Like, oh, that store they mentioned. Let's go back and get to know that story more. Like, let's go down this alley and explore this world more. So it's more about, rather than like, okay, I told the story. I'm done with this story. I'm gonna tell a new story. I'm gonna start building a new universe. I'm like, let's just take what we already established. This basic, this very broad foundation that I have, and just
Mhm.
keep building on it. Just keep building on that, rather than just keep building. Let's expand it. It's almost like those games, like I don't know if it's Minecraft, but you know the those games where you build universes. You literally you start with like a village, and it
Sure,
becomes a
yeah,
kingdom, and it becomes a township, and it just keeps expanding. I'm like, well, let's do that. Let's just do that because it's easier. Rather, and if you don't have to worry so much about, for myself, for what I do at least, if you don't have to worry so much about like of a universe, you focus more on the characters. You know, like okay, I have this character. You know, he's coming into the picture now, but he originally wasn't the first draft of something else that I wrote, but gradually he kind of was edited out of that story. Let's bring this character back and now make him the main character and go back to the same place and just go to places where we that you didn't see the first time. It's more like just keep building on the universe and just bring in new characters and bring new things that are already in there that we just simply didn't were not made or introduced to in the first story. It's just a way
right,
to
right,
just
right.
simply build on what you already have rather than starting from scratch over that which I feel uses up more brain power. It
Yeah,
generates more it burns more brain it requires more brain expenditure versus if you just simply you have already this foundation, you just build on it a little more,
yeah,
but you go deeper into the characters, into the relations, into the story. I enjoy that more. Like I would not be a good um world builder. You know how that's like a thing in fiction. Like people, it's almost like a thing now that takes precedence over the storytelling for some in some
mm,
genres. Like that
yeah,
takes more precedence than telling a story. I'm on the opposite end of that. I'm more about a story build. You know, focus on the story, focus on the characters, focus on their interactions and all that. And the universe kind of just builds itself around them, around their desires, around the things they're doing, that kind
interesting.
of thing.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
is there an analogy for that in music? Because I that works for me, but music again is such a abstract thing for me to get my head around.
really, huh. Well, I was gonna say to that, I mean, I guess like a good story could take place in any universe, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I mean, if you don't focus too, I feel like maybe focusing too much on the world, it's almost like you're writing a story to show people what you can do in world building rather than telling a story of characters and making the characters somewhat relatable to for people to to see themselves, to see a little bit of themselves in the characters
Hmm,
versus maybe someone who's obsessed with building a universe and the characters tend to be shallow. The characters are probably, or maybe they're just designed in a way that they're unrelatable and maybe that doesn't connect. And
hmm.
I imagine there's an audience for that. I imagine there's people who love that, they're dazzled by the universe, but I prefer to just sort of, here's this character, now he's interacting with this other character, and that out of that conversation some events happen. Let's just see what happens, let's just follow them, and as I'm following them, the world is kind of just building around them, around their motivations
Oh,
and desires. Yeah, it's more
okay,
like that.
okay,
Yeah,
that's
so I
cool.
want to hit that organic middle ground where like I'm not building a universe and
Hmm.
then having the character walk through it, but rather the universe maybe reflects a little bit about a little bit about how the character lives, how he or she carries themselves. That's
Oh,
kind of where I'm coming from.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
that's
as far as your characters, are these do you draw inspiration from people like that you know in real life when you're like developing a character?
yes, yeah, I would say so. Yeah, like for example, like maybe people who are difficult. You know, like let's say if you have difficult coworkers, people who are difficult, like like you get annoyed with them, you get irritated, but rather than like hating them, I'm like, what is it, why is this person like that? Like what if I just sort of build a pic, take this person and sort of explore this personality? Like why is this person so difficult? Like why are you making you're making like difficult for the people around you, but more for yourself too. So I'll explore that in a story. I'll explore that, and let's just see where it goes. Let's see where such a personality goes. Or maybe the opposite, maybe someone who was seen as like cool and charismatic and charming, like how does someone become that way? Let's just explore that. Or maybe could it be that this person is really a fake and they just learned how to fake it really well? Like, so that's more where I'm
Hmm.
coming from, just studying personalities. And there's a little bit of that, there's a little bit of drawing from life, from people that you meet. And then there's a little bit of people characters that you admire in literature. Like when I was little, I thought Long John Flint from from Treasure Island. I thought he was awesome. He was a formidable character. I love the fact that this person, this one-legged person he only had one leg, was so badass that everybody around him who had both legs, they were scared of him. So I became
Hmm.
fascinated with that. Like I started the idea in my mind that uh, personality matters more than physical attributes. Like someone can do that. Maybe in your life you do that. You met someone and they seem okay, they seem on the surface okay, but they project an energy. Like maybe you're put off by them, or maybe there's people that you're immediately drawn to them. So you're like, why is that? Like, why this person project this awesome energy that I want to be a part of that person, and why this other person who may not be an asshole, who may not be doing anything bad, you're put off by their energy. You're just like, I don't really want to have anything to do with this person. So
Mm.
I am very fascinated with that, and like how there is something beyond what you see in people, like what they project. And that reminds me of the fact that you are sort of an entity. You're just sort of like this mysterious person. So I find that very fascinating. You created this character, and I'm wondering if
Oh,
you
thank
have a
you.
name and if there's a backstory for this character, which reminds me a little bit of V for Vendetta and a little bit of wrestlers with masks, Mexican wrestlers.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't, people have commented sort of funny things, and I kind of just go with it. But no, I mean, when the character was developed, when I came up with this, it, I don't know. I didn't really. I don't want to say I didn't know what I was doing, but it just. I don't know. I don't know. It just sort of happened this way. You know, I mean, my name, Big Empty Zero, is kind of self-explanatory in the sense that like I wanted to be a faceless sort of thing. I wanted my art to sort of speak for itself and not be sort of as much about the character. I do realize this is a bit of a gimmick, but that's I mean that's not really what my art is all about. I mean, I think I make stuff that I think is cool, and I hope other people like it. And I don't know, this allows me to do that and to be myself in the public eye, and feel more comfortable. And yeah, I don't know.
No, I understand that a little bit because the name that I use, Jay Corso, it's not my real name, but
Yeah.
it's a name that I guess evokes
Hmm.
the awesomeness of characters that growing up, like I'm sort of a shy, kind of like a little bit introverted person.
Yeah.
So growing up, I was like, I couldn't talk to girls, I couldn't do things. It was difficult. And in movies or in literature, I would meet characters, I would come across characters, and I envied that sort of facility, like the way they just kind of breeze through life and charm people into giving them whatever, like charming women, charming all that. So I
Yeah.
started thinking, okay, I'm gonna create a character. I'm going to create a character that embodies all those qualities that I don't have, and
Oh.
I'm going to take that role. I'm going to become that character. And
Yeah.
the name, this is going back to what I told you about how you get something, an idea from somewhere, and you don't know where you got it from, but it's something that's been building for some time. The name J Corso, I just came to me years ago. I don't remember where exactly, but I think it has to do how Hollywood names people. Like a lot of Hollywood, some of the biggest stars in Hollywood,
I was just
the
thinking
names
that.
they have on
Yeah.
camera are not their real names.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
John Wayne is a good example of that. It's something that it's like John Wayne. It has this sort of, it's brief. It's like a short thing. It
Yeah.
doesn't stay in the mind too long, but it communicates a sort of like inner strength. So I was like, okay, I want to do that. Like and then like in literature, there are characters like that. For example, there is a private detective that sold huge in the 50s and 60s, Mike Hammer by Mickey Spillane, the writer named Mickey Spillane. He wrote this character, created
Okay.
this character named Mike Hammer,
That
who
sounds
was a private
familiar.
eye in the mold of the old school hard boiled type. And
Okay.
again, I love that because the guy was like independent. He was like his own man. He didn't take any attitude from anybody. He did whatever he wanted, and he just projected this image of badassery that nobody could touch. And I thought, okay, Mike Hammer. There's
Hmm.
another character who's similar in British literature called Bulldog Drummond. So again, I was drawn to those names. So it's like, okay, I want a name that communicates that strength, but I still want something that communicates also Latino or Mediterranean, something that communicates, that ethnic, that ethnicity, because I don't see Latinos in fiction much, like most of
Yeah.
the, yeah, I don't see that
Yeah.
much. So it's
Sure.
like, so I think that's where J Corso comes from, because J Corso has that Italian, Mediterranean, Latino thing, but it
Yeah.
still has that choppiness. J Corso, like it's immediate, it has like a punch to it.
Yeah.
It's dramatic. So it's like, that's my name. That's J Corso. And what
Yeah,
is J
man.
Corso like? From there, I started building that personality. J Corso is very charismatic. He can speak very easy in front of a crowd. He
Yeah.
can communicate. He's articulate, and by doing that, I found like I could actually do this. Like a few years ago I couldn't have been able to do this, like to sit here with you like this with a camera in my face. Like I would have to have
Yeah,
probably the camera turned off like
yeah,
this,
yeah, I hear you. I hear you.
so by doing that, by inhabiting, be creating this persona and inhabiting that persona, I gradually got over shyness and I became more extroverted. And
Yeah,
I
yeah,
felt better at sharing my, going on. Kind of have to have a thick skin because social media, people can be savage, they can be brutal there.
yeah, man. It's funny. It's funny though because it's almost like you and I were kind of opposite in like how we created our personas, you know. Um, Whereas like I don't know if you feel this way now, but like this kind of allows me to feel myself and be myself in sort of the public eye. Do you feel that way with your new persona?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. Like, I thought even of what you're doing, but then I was like, well, that's
Yeah,
just too complicated. And then I was like, well, you can become trapped by it as well. Better
yeah,
to have a persona that you're wearing, but that nobody really knows that you're wearing. And, like you're hiding in plain sight. I don't know how I came
yeah.
across that. Well, actors, like actors had that. Like, when I was little and I wouldn't, growing up again, I would read about actors and I would admire how they were like larger than life in movies. They were like this incredibly self assured presence in movies. And then I would read behind the stories about them and was always shocked to find out that a lot of them are very like quiet, very like lost. So in private life, they're like soft spoken. They avoid public because they're introverted, they're heavily introverted. And then fans can be like very aggressive in the way they behave towards them.
Mhm.
So that fascinated me, the whole idea of the double. You have this personality on camera that you project where you seem like untouchable. But in private life, not only are they maybe shy, but they also have a lot of personal demons, like people who like they have like
Sure.
addictions, they have like anything, sex addiction, drug addiction.
Mhm.
They have like a lot of personal problems because their personality, their truth, they seem to like not quite be able to reconcile their ego with with their on-screen persona, with their personal persona, so that causes problems in their personal life. So
Mhm.
I became fascinated with that, also the duality, I guess. The how Fyodor Dostoevsky has that novel called The Double, which is the premise that also for the same reason there is a double of this person who is a very soft-spoken, under just under everything, a person who's sort of undersells himself, and this person is now being sort of replaced, gradually being pushed out of his own life by this double of himself who is more assertive, who is more ambitious. Everything he lacks, this person has, and I was very fascinated with that. And I see that in real life. I see that with actors. I see it. I see it with like a performance. Like you, for example, like you. I imagine maybe we have that in common, that you created this persona so you can just do this thing, so you can do this thing
Mhm.
without having to feel self-conscious. You can just forget
Mhm.
yourself and just focus on making the music and
Yeah.
doing the things. And same with me, it's the same, because that can paralyze. Like there are people like it
Yeah.
makes me sad to think about people who probably had musical talent or had talent for something, like artists, like photographers. I was reading someone, a lady who passed away, and it turns out for her entire life, she'd been taking photos. She'd been taking just beautiful pictures, of photography, but she would not show it to anybody. And she,
Mhm.
she died. And I guess a niece was going through her things after she passed away, and she discovered all these photos that she took. And posthumously, she became a well-known photographer. And
Oh
that just
wow.
made me sad, like just to know that you had this talent and you never shared it with anybody because you were afraid of judgment, or you thought people were going to laugh at you. And that is
Yeah.
tragic, and that happens all the time. There are
I
people
was
who,
gonna
they
say,
live their
man.
entire
Yeah.
lives like that. So it's like,
Yeah.
no, like that can't be. No, like what do I have to do? Like, how do I find a way to just put myself out there and just not care about what people think? How do I liberate myself from the opinion of others, which is a really big thing. It's like a thing that really can wear you down. It's like this invisible thing around your neck
Absolutely.
that if you don't address it, it limits in every aspect. Never mind, like, creating,
Mhm.
just going about your life, like in your work. Like maybe you will not go as high as you could in your work because you feel afraid to ask for raises. You feel afraid of promotions.
Mhm.
Social interactions, you don't show yourself as much as you could. You kind of hold yourself back. So it's a
Mhm.
really serious thing. So that is a subject that I explore in my work as well. Like the personality, how withholding your personality versus people who do not hold back, people who are just like complete ids, they're just runaway ids. They do not hold back, and they just steamroll people like that. If you don't put brakes on people like that, they just roll right over you.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you definitely got to put yourself out there.
Yeah. Is that an experience for you? Like, do you feel like that happens to you in your personal life? where you can be, taken over by a
Uh,
stronger personality if you don't like put
no.
boundaries or.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, I have to put up boundaries, but no, yeah, no, I mean, at this point in my life, no, I'm not, I don't really take shit from people anymore,
Good.
I'm kind of too old for that, and, I just, yeah, I mean, yeah, if someone's being an asshole, and I'm from the East Coast too, I'm out here living in California, so, like,
Oh, wow.
I think the vibe is a little different, where sometimes, if somebody kind of oversteps me, you gotta kind of, put them in their place a little bit, and then they're kind of like, "Whoa, I didn't think you were gonna get aggressive." It's like, "Well, yeah, man, don't fuck with me." And then,
Exactly. It's like, yeah,
and then they understand, and either everything's cool or you don't mess with that person anymore.
okay, that's good. Yeah. Okay, so
So
exactly. Some people don't seem to understand that. Some people just they do that, and I guess it's true. Some people just don't know. Some people don't
I
seem to
just,
know that and don't
I
seem to
just don't,
understand that.
I don't have time for it anymore, man. I don't have time for the drama. It's like I got stuff to do. If I'm doing a job, or if I'm doing, if I'm trying to focus on my music or whatever, and someone's coming at me with like negativity, I'm not into it.
Exactly. Yeah. No, that can
Yeah,
affect you. Yeah, that kind of shit can affect you. Then after that, like you
yeah,
cannot really do the thing. You had all these
yeah,
ideas and they're gone now because you're in this
yeah.
upset state of mind. Yeah.
But I will say, I mean, I do think that's a skill, being able to be assertive in your life, and
Yes.
yeah, you gotta put yourself out there. You gotta find that confidence, however you can, and be authentic to yourself, and
Yeah.
don't take shit from anyone.
Exactly. Yeah. And sometimes it's through that. It's through doing something where you find like, everything comes together, like whether it's music or writing or maybe even make flower arrangements or origami. Like you find that thing that everything clicks, like everything you feel that inner peace, you're in flow. And
Yeah,
that usually is the thing that you start building from. Like that thing kind of gives you that inner serenity and the confidence that comes with it to just simply, go through life and do the things you have to do. And not
yeah,
necessarily go around like starting trouble with people, but speaking up when you feel like you're not being appreciated or you're being undervalued. Yeah.
exactly. Well, I'm gonna change gears here real quick. I always like to do a little segment on the show that I like to call.
Questions from the internet.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah, so I got some questions here that were submitted, that I thought I would ask you.
You
Uh,
had listeners submit questions to you.
I did, yes.
Oh, wow.
So, some of these
Uh-huh.
were from, some were on Twitter, some were on Reddit, and I don't know if I'm gonna get through all these, or we did cover quite a few things, but this one you actually already answered. All right, if you had to give some advice to your younger self, what would you tell them?
Do not listen to people. Like, invest time learning how to ignore the opinions of people because that's
Mm,
really what helped me back on doing things when I was younger. Just being so self-conscious that I was afraid of what people would say when if I showed like if I put my writing out there, if I put something out there, that helped me back for longer than I should have actually started doing things. So learn to ignore the opinions of others. Train yourself to do that more than anything else, to just ignore the opinions of others because once you're free from that, you're very powerful.
yeah, awesome. Um, okay, so this is a question, kind of about, I guess, you as a comic creator. But for someone starting out as a comic creator, is there a certain genre of comics you find sell better than others for independent artists specifically? For example, superhero, alternative, horror, comedy.
This is a tricky question because I'm not fully immersed in what sells. Like,
Mm,
if you're really good at a drawing, I would say, and you don't mind, like, you don't care what it is, maybe try to work at Marvel or DC because you don't own anything there, but it's like it seems to be a great training ground for,
yeah,
honing your skills. And then after that, you have the name now, you build up a reputation and you have the skills and you can do whatever you want. But it's hard to say what sells. Like
yeah,
I'm gonna say horror maybe. Like horror seems to be
yeah,
popular across many platforms. Like I know it's
yeah.
really popular in movies, so maybe it's also popular for comics as well, especially if you can tie it to some other property, like if you can tie it to say the
Mm,
Insidious universe, or something like that, it'll
okay.
probably go over even bigger. It'll probably sell even more.
Yeah, I
But
think in the independent space, or the more underground space, I definitely see a lot more horror comics than anything else.
okay, yeah, so maybe horror. Maybe
Yeah,
horror seems to be the big thing everywhere. Like
yeah.
So maybe that one, maybe
But I'm
horror.
also, I'm also looking for it. I'm also looking for the horror, so maybe that's why I see it everywhere. I don't know.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. Whereas I tend to look more for science fiction, I guess, something that's a little bit bizarre. And it doesn't necessarily have to be horror, but it's tricky because sometimes sci-fi and horror cross over into each other, and usually that's the best kind of sci-fi, the one that has like a horror element to it too.
Yeah. Um. Okay. This is, talking about comics. What fictional power do you find most interesting?
What? What? I'm sorry. What kind of power you say again?
Yeah. What fictional power do you find most
Oh,
interesting? So I guess that, maybe like a superhero power kind of thing.
oh, wow. It's a yeah. I don't know. If I was a kid, I would have said the ability to fly. As an adult now, I'm not so sure.
Yeah.
I guess maybe the ability to become invisible, so
Dude,
you can find out what people are saying when you're not around.
I was just gonna say,
You can find out who your friends really are.
yeah. All right. What's a pre-existing character you wish you could write?
Probably Corto Maltese. He is a character created by Hugo Pratt, and the best way I can describe him is he is a bit like Clint Eastwood in the spaghetti western trilogy, like the A Fistful of Dollars, A Few Dollars More, and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. He is this very cool, charismatic guy who is a little mysterious. You don't know much
Hmm.
about him, and he seems to be sort of indifferent to everyone, but he actually has like a sense of justice.
Okay.
But he appears to be kind of out for himself. But he actually does reveal that he cares about like the underprivileged. So just a fascinating character, and the way the stories are told. Hugo Pratt, the creator, he was very well traveled. He traveled extensively, and the comics are always set in South America, in Europe, in countries, and they're informed with the authenticity of someone who went to these places and really got to know the people really well. Just an amazing comic with an amazing character, Corto Maltese. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. Sounds like a complex dude. What's something that you wish more people understood or appreciated about making comics?
That it takes time. It takes a lot of effort. It's not as it's work. There's telling a story, but you know how you tell the story, how you use the canvas of the page. It's an art from within the art form that draws from commercial art as well, draws from painting, draws from many mediums.
Hmm.
But it does something unique. It does something that only that medium can do, which is amazing. It's just an amazing thing when it's done well. When you see someone doing it well, you're moved. You're just wow, this is just amazing. So yeah, just that it's work. It's a lot of work, but it's
Yeah.
rewarding, incredibly rewarding when you do it. When it's done, it's just rewarding in a way that very few things in life give you that feeling.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, awesome, man. That's all I got for questions.
All right.
So yeah, man. I thank you again for coming on here, man. And
Thank you for having me. This was a blast. I
yeah,
hope that we can get together in the future again, or maybe even if you have
yeah,
more people over, so we can bring someone from a different discipline and just sort of
yeah,
compare
definitely,
crafts. You know.
definitely. That's something I want to do down the line is like kind of like a panel discussion, or I even talk to somebody about maybe doing some trivia or something like that. Might be kind of fun.
Yeah, that would be cool, man.
But
That would be awesome.
yeah. So I'm gonna wrap this up. But is there anything, any kind of last minute thoughts that you would like to let people know, or maybe some advice for somebody just starting out with whatever their creative process is?
I guess if you're starting out now, as you do your thing, your craft, learn also social media marketing. Learn how to leverage the platforms because I don't know how to do that. I'm getting into that now, but
Mhm,
it is fascinating to me that you can do something. And I guess we kind of turn this back to the beginning of the recording where
mhm,
we were talking about how you literally can create your own audience. You can build your own audience right there on the internet, but there is a way to navigate in the platforms to do that, to leverage attention, to leverage your post to make them reach more people. So learn that because to me it's just amazing, it's fascinating that you have the power to literally go out there and create your own audience, just bring your audience to you through these platforms. That is incredibly fascinating to me. That yeah, so learn marketing, learn digital marketing, learn social media marketing, learn how to write on social media, how to leverage influencers, how to
mhm.
leverage followers of other people's audiences. Like learn that as you're doing your craft also because it's amazing. I mean, like it's all right there for you. It's just knowing how to do it. It's like a like code. It's like a coded language. When you understand it, people just start coming to you. It's really cool and amazing. It's magical almost in the way it happens.
Hell yeah. And if anyone wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
So I mentioned I have an Instagram called RoboPulp, but I am on Twitter more. I am Twitter a lot. So RoboPulp on Twitter. That's usually where you find me a lot. I pretty much live there. I have a Facebook, but I barely use it. I have a YouTube that I haven't done anything with it. And
Not
yeah,
yet.
Twitter would be the best bet to find me. That's where I found you, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Well, cool. Thanks a lot, man, and we'll see you guys on the next one.
Thank you so much. Yeah, looking forward to another one. Thank you so
Oh
much.
yeah.
Have a great afternoon.
Thanks, man. You too.
Bye.